So, with Detective Pikachu coming out, does this finally mean that the curse of video game movie adaptations being bad is finally— oh god, for the love of Arceus, please, no! Hello everyone, Leah from Toon here, and today we're talking about the much anticipated movie, Detective Pikachu. Now, just as a quick warning, this video is going to have spoilers in it, but I will give a written and verbal warning for when that's about to happen. So don't worry about any major spoilers from this video unless, of course, you want to see them. I'll make sure that you have the opportunity to skip past anything that may ruin the experience for you. Now, if you're like me, you're probably very skeptical of any and all video game movie adaptations. After all, we've been graced with such classics like Super Mario Bros, Alone in the Dark, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, and many more. So when it finally came time for Pokemon to receive its first official live-action movie, I think it's safe to say that everyone was expecting the worst. But trailer after trailer, we soon realized that this movie didn't actually look that bad, that maybe it wasn't just some cash grab that was created for the sole purpose of feeding off of our nostalgia. And so, the attitude shifted on this movie, away from negative skepticism and towards hopeful excitement, especially when the Rotten Tomatoes score came in fresh at a 71%. And so, after much anticipation, that day is finally here. May 10th of 2019 is finally upon us, and so that means that Detective Pikachu has been released and can now be seen in theaters. But does the movie hold up to the hype, or is it doomed to be grouped with the video game adaptation monstrosities of the past? Well, let's take a look. First, a little backstory about this movie. Detective Pikachu was produced by Warner Brothers, Legendary Pictures, and the Pokemon Company. It was also directed by Rob Letterman, who was also the director on Los Gringos, Shark Tale, Monsters vs. Aliens, Gulliver's Travels, and Goosebumps. The idea of a live-action movie was pitched to the Pokemon Company in 2012 and then proceeded to take 7 years to come to fruition. The Pokemon Company shot down the idea at first until March of 2016. Pokemon Go was just released and it was a worldwide phenomenon. This showed the Pokemon Company that there was an interest in something that was live-action, and so Legendary and Warner Brothers finally got the rights to make the Pokemon movie. It was actually almost nabbed by Paramount at first, which let's be happy that didn't happen. This movie features Ryan Reynolds as the voice of Pikachu, Justice Smith as Tim Goodman, and Catherine Newton as Lucy Stevens. Interestingly enough, Ryan Reynolds is also how Pikachu got his facial expressions, as it was done via motion capture. Reynolds has gone on record saying that he picks up on his own micro-expressions even through Pikachu's cartoonish features. He finds it a little weird that he is easily able to see himself and his own expressions through what is essentially a caffeine-addicted mouse. Rhyme City, which is where the movie takes place for the majority of the runtime, is based off the cities of Tokyo, New York, and London. Because the city is meant to be a Pokemon paradise, the team that worked on these movies incorporated the qualities of these cities while also adding in their own fantasy elements. For example, the Pokemon seem pretty integrated within their society, not as battle partners, but as companions to their humans. In one scene, they even have a Machamp stopping and directing traffic around a sleeping Snorlax. Now, this isn't a new concept. In the Pokemon games as well as in the anime, it is common to see Pokemon helping humans complete tasks, and overall just making their lives easier. Like how in Ruby and Sapphire, a Machamp will help you and your mom moving into your new house. However, this seems to be the case where the Pokemon are the most integrated. It seems more like the Pokemon are simply coexisting with humans in a mutualistic way, rather than just doing jobs like we've seen them do in the past. And this brings us to the overarching plot of the story. Now, I'm not revealing anything past what the trailers have already shown, so this part in particular is spoiler-free, so long as you don't count trailer footage as spoilers. Tim Goodman is a 21-year-old who works as an insurance worker. Harry Goodman, his father whom he is estranged from, works in Rhyme City as a detective. When Harry goes missing and is presumed to be dead, Tim is called to the Rhyme City police station to pick up his father's belongings from his apartment. While he's grieving the loss of his father and trying to get closure, a Pikachu breaks into the complex. And if his sudden appearance wasn't strange enough, Tim can even understand what the electric-type Pokemon is saying to him. Pikachu then confesses to Tim that he's lost his memory and that he doesn't remember anything about who he is. The only clue he has about his past is the address inside his detective cap, as well as the name of Harry Goodman written inside of it. The two then become convinced that Harry is still alive and decide to set out to find him. Along the way, they meet Lucy Stevens and her partner Psyduck, who are reporters for CNN. Looking for a big scoop to land her a higher job than just unpaid intern, she decides to help Pikachu and Tim find Harry. While Lucy is clearly Tim's love interest, it doesn't feel like there's a forced dynamic between the two at all, which is often something these movies fall prey to to very easily. This movie even pokes fun at the trope a bit, which is refreshing to say the least. Forced romance can really sour a movie for me, so I'm glad that it didn't really happen too much here. There were jokes cracked at the idea, but it wasn't anything overwhelming, and it actually was pretty funny. As far as the designs and animation go, I actually really liked those aspects of the film, and this is coming from someone who rolls their eyes at all the live-action remakes Disney is pumping out. I'm not a huge live-action person per se, but I think that the designs of the Pokemon showcased in this movie were pretty impressive with how they stayed loyal to the original version while also putting them in a real-life environment. My favorites are probably Charizard and Gyarados though. Those ones came out really cool and are super impressive. When this movie finally has a digital release, I'm going to need to pause a few times in order to see the finer details and textures of the models to fully appreciate it. Pikachu's facial expressions were also done really well and super intriguing to watch at times. It was surprising to see how well he could express himself, and the same goes for the other Pokemon in the movie as well. Snubbull in one scene actually goes from really aggressive to looking like a slightly less aggressive cuddly teddy bear. The only thing I sort of had a problem with was in some of the scenes where Tim carried Pikachu. When Pikachu is sitting on his shoulder, that looked fine, but in some scenes where Tim needed to carry him in his arms, the tracking looked, well, off. It wasn't enough to completely ruin the scene or anything like that, but you could tell that the tracking wasn't as strong there for some reason. But for those curious, the scene I'm talking about happens right after the Torterra scene. You'll know when you see it. Other than that little hiccup in that one scene, however, I'm pretty satisfied with the look and feel of it. As someone who grew up with the Pokemon series and whose first handheld game was Pokemon Yellow, visually this movie is always what I had imagined when I thought of Pokemon in the real world. I think they did an excellent job of translating traditionally animated and cartoon creatures into a real setting without losing their appeal. As far as acting goes, I think it was good for the majority of the movie. Ryan Reynolds did an amazing job both voice acting and emoting for Pikachu, and he was honestly my favorite character throughout the movie. He also got in some really good jokes multiple times throughout the movie, serving as a comedic relief character. Some of his jokes were a hit or miss, but his personality is really one that I enjoyed a lot. However, some parts in the beginning with Justice Smith were a little, well, forced, for lack of a better term. For example, in the start of the movie, his friend attempts to encourage him to capture a Cubone for his first Pokemon. The starting and establishing scenes between the two were a bit awkward, especially when he first gets the phone call about his dad having gone missing. A lot of the dialogue in these opening scenes were choppy and somewhat repetitive. It just felt weird to me, especially considering that I think Justice's performance and the writing once he arrived in Rhyme City was much better, and it wasn't actually bad at all. It could be that they just weren't very sure on how to introduce the characters and the world, which I can understand. It just felt out of place to me, especially considering we don't see this friend again for the rest of the movie. And honestly, for the life of me, I can't remember what his name even was. Not a good sign. I feel that the supporting cast and other main characters were written pretty good as well. Lucy isn't overly obnoxious and is pushy in the beginning when she's introduced, but dies down a lot after her initial introduction. I was so worried she was going to be the obligatory in-your-face, I told you so female lead, but I was pleasantly surprised when she turned out to be, well, not the obnoxious journalist I thought she was going to be when she was introduced. I also think that her actress, Kathryn Newton, did a pretty good job at her role in the movie. But with these main characters out of the way, I'm about to talk about some spoilery characters now. These are the characters that weren't introduced in the trailers and are characters who also weren't even hinted at even existing. So if you don't want to be spoiled, either click off this video or skip to the timestamp on screen now to avoid the spoiler portion of this video. Alright, you ready? Let's go. Howard Clifford, who is played by Bill Nighy, is actually a very interesting antagonist, and I really enjoyed the concept behind his motives. Howard was diagnosed with a degenerative disease that would eventually completely immobilize him. In order to find a way to cure himself, he decided to study Pokemon by living closely with them. This is what led to the creation of Rhyme City, a Pokemon and human utopia where there are no trainers or Pokemon battles, just peaceful coexistence. He studied the Pokemon evolutionary process, saying that he hopes to learn how humans can evolve into better versions of themselves just as Pokemon do. Now, if anyone has played the Pokemon games, this guy is your first and primary suspect for an antagonist. In every game you have that Lysander-looking motherfucker who claims to love Pokemon, but for all the wrong reasons. This is the classic Giovanni-looking guy that's all too recognizable. He may be missing the mess that is Lysander's pyroid mane of a hairdo, but it has a similar feeling nonetheless. Howard tries to complete his research by capturing and experimenting on Mewtwo, since he is considered to be the most powerful Pokemon in existence. existence. Howard sends Harry out to find Mewtwo, who is said to have escaped the Kanto region many years ago. Harry finds Mewtwo, but was tricked into finding him as he thought Howard was using him for far less malicious reasons. Dr. Anne Laurent, who is played by Rita Ora, is a scientist known for experimenting with mind control in Pokemon. She aids Howard in experimenting on Mewtwo. They eventually learn how to extract Mewtwo's DNA, which leads to the creation of something called Chemical R. R is a gas-like substance that, when inhaled by a Pokemon, causes them to lose all reasoning and control of their bodies. They go into a rampage-like state that they can't control, attacking everyone and everything in their path. This gas was the first step in the mind-controlling process and is why Mewtwo was needed in their experiments. Eventually, Dr. Anne Laurent develops a mind control headset that can force the mind of a human into the body of a Pokemon who also has a headset on. This allows Howard to take over Mewtwo's body and use his abilities to force humans into their Pokemon companions' bodies. It turns out that Chemical R was used to make the Pokemon's mind weak and more susceptible to being overtaken by the human that is being forced into them by Mewtwo's powers. This is why there's a parade in the movie, because the parade balloons are filled with Chemical R and allows Howard to turn Rhyme City into the first area of forced evolution. The interesting thing that the movie tries to do is throw us off because they're aware that Howard is an extremely predictable villain. So what they do to combat this is act like Howard's son, Roger Clifford, has taken over his father's company and out of spite is trying to ruin it. Howard tells Tim that he was a horrible and neglectful father, and so his son grew to resent Pokemon and sought to turn them into tools and ruin the utopia that Rhyme City was built to be. However, it's revealed that no, Roger doesn't feel this way. In fact, he actually helps Tim fight back against his father to save the city once he's able to. And I just really find it interesting that his motives weren't really as malicious as they first seemed. Like, yeah, the guy was a loony, and he did decide that the only way to evolve the human race was to fuse them with Pokemon without their consent, but I honestly don't think he was doing it with malicious intentions. If he felt this was the only way for humans to solve their problems, then his heart was kinda in the right place, I guess. It's super messed up that you're essentially erasing the mind of a sentient Pokemon to take its body, but I can kinda see why he would think being a Pokemon would be the next stage in evolution for a human. I mean, if you're a Pokemon, you can literally breathe fire and control electricity. That's far more than what a human can do on a physical level. So I'm kinda glad that his motives at least make sense, whereas some antagonists like Lysander are Thanos wannabes with weak writing and motives. I think that overall, the antagonist was pretty interesting and matched the spirit of the Pokemon games pretty accurately, just with far less battling. It also even has some elements of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon in it, as it's revealed by Mewtwo that he was trying to help save Tim's father from Howard, but failed. The Greninja attacked and made his car go off the road, fatally injuring Harry. To save him, Mewtwo transferred Harry's mind and soul into his partner Pokemon, Pikachu. That's why he has amnesia, and is also why Tim can understand him. By the end of the movie, Mewtwo reveals who Pikachu actually is, and pulls Harry from Pikachu's body. It's a predictable yet sweet ending to the movie. My one major problem with the story and its pacing is actually in the lab scene. There's something called the Torterra Garden, where they were conducting evolutionary tests on Torterras to make them bigger. And these Pokemon are huge. They're like giant sleeping mountains that only get up and move when they're disturbed. While visually impressive, it felt like it added absolutely nothing to the movie. Like, yeah, it did end with Pikachu getting fatally injured by a falling rock from one of the Torterras, but even then, they had Greninjas who were chasing and hurling ice at them right before this. It felt like the scene went on for way too long, and Pikachu being fatally injured by a very small falling rock following up this scene was extraordinarily anticlimactic. I think it would have been better if they cut the entire Torterra Garden part out of the movie and instead had Pikachu injured fighting off a bunch of Greninjas. It'd also be a nice parallel to when Pikachu fought the Sparrows to save Ash back in season 1 of the Pokemon anime. Just instead of with Sparrows, it's just a bunch of creepy mind-controlled Greninjas. Speaking of parallels and callbacks, there were a lot of those in this movie. The first obvious one is Tim and Lucy. Tim is someone with a Pikachu as their partner, and Lucy is someone with a Psyduck as their partner. To me, this is a play at Ash and Misty from the original Kanto Adventures. You also have Snorlax blocking a roadway while sleeping, their news network being named CNM instead of CNN, Jigglypuff accidentally putting someone to sleep in a bar, and many others that I probably didn't catch. If you have anything that I didn't mention, feel free to comment about it down below because I'd love to see what you guys noticed. Along with being faithful to its subject material, I think it was very good at adding to the lore of the Pokemon universe. There were a lot of interesting concepts introduced that further built on the relationship between humans and Pokemon, and it was nice to have an entire movie that that was basically world building. And the good thing about this world building is that it was done in such a way that wasn't confusing to non-Pokemon fans. I actually went to go see this movie with my mom, who knows next to nothing about Pokemon outside of the battling aspect. I asked her after the movie if it confused her at all, and she said that she was able to follow along perfectly with what was happening. This means that for a lot of people, likely of a younger audience, this may be their first introduction to the series, and I personally think that it's a pretty good one. All that being said, I give Detective Pikachu a 7.8 out of 10. I think it was a pretty solid movie that was able to accurately portray the feeling that I had playing Pokemon growing up. As someone who's played all the mainline games, it did give me the same vague feeling I remember having when I was younger. This movie isn't anything groundbreaking in terms of Pokemon storytelling, but I think that it was able to do what it was created to do and is something that fans of the series will enjoy while waiting for Sword and Shield. And if you liked this video and want to see more from me in the future, why not subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified of when I upload. I may even have a Detective Pikachu theory coming out in the near future, so that may be something you're interested in. And with that, I hope to see you all in my next video. Have an amazing day, guys.